Welcome to the Deeper Into Movies podcast. My name is Stephen T. Hanley. I'm the founder and lead curator of Deeper Into Movies. We're a pop-up cinema based in London and New York. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by author and journalist Lizzy Goodman. She is the author of the now classic book, Meet Me in the Bathroom, detailing the early 2000s New York indie scene. This is a two-part podcast special. I've already spoke to Dylan and Will, the directors of the documentary, but I thought it's only fair we go back to Lizzy Goodman, who wrote the book and spent 7 years working on this. 300 interviews, 700 pages, spectacular book. So this is definitely more a conversation episode than a structured interview. Me and Lizzy go into it deep about what books we're into, discovering music, the indie scene, fashion choices, our mutual love for Joan Didion, and collecting books. So this is me and Lizzy Goodman talking for 1 hour. Enjoy. There we go. Just turning off Taylor Swift. I meant Fugazi. Sorry. Alexa.
Yeah, sure. No, right. Same difference,
Exactly
basically.
the same energy.
That's right.
Same energy, same ethics. Totally.
Same energy, same ethics. Pretty much. They have some things in common, to be honest.
They both have bangers. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's one of the things.
Yeah. How's things with you?
Good. Things are good. How are you doing?
Good. Busy.
Yeah, totally. Same here.
But I kind of complain when I'm too busy and then get depressed when not enough is going on and I feel I'm going to go bankrupt.
Oh, yes. I have. Well, you must be a freelance artist of some kind because that's basically the vibe. Yeah. I have the same problem.
Yeah, we program films in London and we've expanded. We have the podcast, we have soundtracks, and
amazing.
Meet Me in the Bathroom score is going to be our next release, I think.
No way, well. That's incredible. Wait, wow. Gosh.
Yeah, because there's all that kind of beautiful kind of Steve Reich ambient stuff going underneath the movie.
They did an amazing job. Oh, that's really cool. Wow.
But I really want that Walt Whitman poem to be the opening track. So we're going to, but also don't want to get sued by the Walt Whitman estate. So we're trying to work out who.
His people are really litigious, as I understand it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is it whoever recorded the audio? Do they own it, or do people?
Right, because it's probably, what is that called? Public domain now?
If it's after like X amount of years, yes.
Right. It just becomes part, which I find so funny. It's like, if you've been dead for long enough, we own your shit is basically the theme. But
this guy, Joseph Van Wisem, who plays with Jim Jarmusch, is doing a live score to Nosferatu.
Ooh, fun.
And because it's 100 years old, it's free license.
Suddenly it's allowed. That's amazing. That's really, wow. Yeah. It's funny. I wish I understood. I should learn about it. The sort of like the origins of that decision.
Yeah, it's kind of rude, isn't it? It's just like, you're 100 years, so fuck your IP, dead guy. It's just, right. It's ours.
And is
now.
It just like, that's the amount of time after which we think the sort of estate,
that's the cutoff.
Like, will they just not care?
Anyone who cares would have been dead.
Because 100 is not that long.
No.
Actually.
No, but it's kind of like, I like it like, yeah, widows, ex-girlfriends, whoever, they're probably dead. So it's ours for the taking.
Yeah. We feel like it's safe that you're dead too now. So anyway, it's just funny. It's a funny thing. But anyway, for those of us who are trying to make interesting stuff, it has its advantages. So I guess I shouldn't complain. But
No, when it works in our favor for a sick
Yeah,
release.
that's
Yeah.
right. When it works in our favor, we're in favor of it.
Whitman,
But
Schwitman, yeah.
on its face, it's a bit confusing.
It really is.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Sorry I've been a bit difficult to track down, just the usual chaos over here, but happy to be here doing this.
Yeah, me too. I've been wanting to speak to you since your book came out. So
well, here we are.
Here we are.
A few short years later.
Yeah. I bought the UK edition, and then I preferred the American cover. So I bought the American hardback.
Me too.
And then I ruined that on holiday. So then I bought the paperback when I was in New York last, because I wanted to revisit.
Amazing. So you've bought my book 3 times. This is
yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have to ask, what did you do to ruin the hardcover?
I was on the beach and I got a bunch of sand in it and it got a little bit wet. It was fine, but I have a thing. I'm all about the right edition of the book.
Got it.
And my Allie, who works with me, was over in Sundance, and I sent her a text saying, "You need to buy me the new copy of Bryce and Alice for Shards." And she was like, "Dude, I just saw on Instagram you were at the UK book signing yesterday." And I was like, "This is not the Chip Kid Simon and Schuster book cover. Please." I kind of felt like Miranda Priestley in Devil Wears Prada, where she's telling her to go get the new Harry Potter book.
That's right. You're exactly the same. When I first saw you, I thought you and Miranda, you know who this guy reminds me of? Yeah. Immediate thought.
It's all about the paper. It's all about the book cover.
I'm that way too. I think anyone who's really sort of in this world to a certain extent has a fastidious collector mindset somewhere in there. I have that too. I can be a little obsessive about editions and, having the right copy of the right thing that has this sort of like significance built into it because of its whatever particular time that it came out or the cover that was done for that. Like I'm a sucker for all of that. So I feel you.
Yeah. It's like when normal people, like my girlfriend, will say, "It's the same words."
Yeah.
It's the same. I'm like, no, it's going to hit different.
Yeah, that's totally missing the point. Well, it's about in our defense. I mean, basically, first of all, the caveat being that we're nuts. It is the same words, but that there's something about the way that it's always about trying to preserve a certain way into something that you love. Like there's something about having I'll give you one for me. One of my great white whale eBay searches is the, I believe it's 1961. I have it set up. The 1961. Oh, now I can't remember which year it is. I think it's 1961, but that seems a little early. Edition, like August issue of Vogue, which is where Self-Respect by Joan Didion first ran, which was her first piece of journalism that was printed in Vogue. And there's this whole story behind it, which probably, many people know, but just that she had been assigned, they needed a certain number of words on self-respect. The piece had already been assigned and it was like laid out in the issue. And somehow the writer fell through. And so they assigned her, they're like, "Hey, new girl, like write 600 words on self-respect." And she did. And that became like this sort of, very significant first piece of published journalism for her, and what really an incredible piece of writing in general still all these years later. And there is, like, if you go to vogue.com, they have you can see it. You can see the original layout. They've, archived, they've digitized all these archives. You're able to see all that stuff. But somehow I still just want, it's like I could print that out. Like I could make, but I want the real thing. I want to see that issue of Vogue. And it's not like the words are available everywhere. They're available in 3 different versions of that essay that I have in different forms in my house on bookshelves. They're available online. We could look them up right now, but there's something about the idea of being able to actually hold an issue that in which that originally appeared that feels like, and maybe it wouldn't, but feels like it would create or renew or somehow deepen or expand my relationship with that writing already. So it's not, maybe it wouldn't, but it feels like it would. So maybe that argument, or it's not really an argument, maybe that explanation merely doubles down on my craziness, but that's just the type of person that I am.
No, you're absolutely right. I have a stack of eBay safe searches and alerts when stuff comes on sale. And
Yeah.
I remember when I was in New York just before the pandemic, went to this place, Jerry Ollinger's movie memorabilia store, which it just has an archive of movie paraphernalia.
Cool. Where's that? I've never even heard of that.
It's in Brooklyn somewhere, but it's just like you buzz in, you go upstairs, and it's like a little office with two cranky New York guys running it. But you come in there to say, what are you into? What do you want to see? Obviously, you don't have to buy anything, but we'll just pull some stuff out, and
so they're like curators of your crazy brain.
Yeah, and they just say it's a lot easier if you tell us what you're into, because we've got like thousands.
Maybe they can find my Vogue for me.
They're amazing. Seriously. I said to them I wanted, I said, you probably don't have it, but I need Peter Bogdanovich's Veil Loft poster. And they were like, well, that was no, they were like, it's self-released. We don't know if we have it. We go out back, and I was kind of like, all right, I'll buy a ton of this other shit anyway and make me feel better about myself. And then I just had like, got one.
Oh my God.
I almost cried. It was the most exciting geeky moment for me.
What is this place called?
Jerry Ollinger's movie memorabilia.
Okay.
Coolest guys.
I will not. What if I was just like, okay, it's been great talking to you, and just hung up?
Yeah, I got something to do with my day now. Thank you.
So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for buying 3 copies of my book. Bye. I have to go lose the rest of my afternoon in this.
Okay, it's been great.
I've now written it down, so I'll be able to go and look. I can't believe I don't know about this place. Thanks for thank you. And also,
RIP, $200 minimum. Yeah. So I always ask my guests, what kind of teenager were you? What kind of movies and...
Oh, that's such a good question. Ooh, I might steal that for future interviews. What kind of teenager was I? It's a little embarrassing because I think the sort of paradigm for someone who then goes and does what I've gone and done to some extent is like, you're supposed to say you were like a miserable kind of misanthropic loser, and that's the cool version of this. I wasn't that. Maybe inside, like I always, whenever I think about this or write about sort of the island of misfit toys nature of New York City as a concept, and certainly as a reality for me and my friends during the period that Meet Me in the Bathroom covers, especially the early years, like I definitely felt that way. I definitely felt, oh, I found my people. Oh, my people aren't where I came from. They are, but they aren't. Like, I'm that restlessness, that sense of like not fitting in. But it was kind of interior. Like I didn't, I was like a chubby nerd in middle school, but by high school, like early high school is one thing, but like I had friends, I had like, I always think that I have these hilarious photos of me and one of my best friends at prom with like boys who were 1 year older, like that's what more sign of relative coolness is there in high school? Upperclassmen knew my name. So I didn't have that kind of like, and I wasn't cool in that way. I didn't have sort of I didn't have the kind of taste, what would you call it? Like palette that you're supposed to have to then become a rock journalist. And in a weird way, I think my insecurity about being what we would now call basic, was sort of part of the weirdness that ended up bonding me to a lot of these. That was weird. Like I felt weird about that. I was like, what if because I'm from New Mexico. I wasn't from a cool, like all the kids who grew up in New Jersey, right across the river from New York, or various Eastern places, or of course, California has its own lore. Like there were no bands that came to play here. There was like one little record store, but I didn't have that kind of upbringing where it was like that kind of adolescence where it was like, there's this weird guy at a record store. There's this club that we used to sneak into. It's like, it's Albuquerque, New Mexico. Like my first show was Bush with Goo Goo Dolls and No Doubt opening, and they played at Tingley Coliseum, which is where the rodeo happens. You know, it's like the state fairgrounds. Like this is not, so in a way, like all of that, all of the stuff that became a part of my life existed in this other realm that was not accessible from where I actually was. And I know that's a common theme for a lot of like suburban kids, but it seemed extra extreme, I think, being from Albuquerque and also being like I just said, rejected internally, but not externally.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, I was like, when do I get to be a rebel? I'm getting good grades and my parents are pretty nice and I have friends. Like, but wait, where's the part where I get to turn into Daria? Like someone help me out here. So that's the kind of teenager that I was.
So how are you discovering music? I had a cool older brother, which was my gateway to...
God. See, if only.
But I should say, when I was talking to the older kids at school, I had this thing when my brother was really into like grunge, shoegaze, weirdly really liked Harry Connick Jr. as well. So I remember I was talking to these older kids and I was like, hey, how's that new Sonic Youth LP? And they're like, great. And I'm like, Jesus and Mary Chain? Like, fuck yeah. And I'm like, the Harry Connick Jr. When Harry Met Sally soundtrack? Beautiful. And they were like, are you fucking with us? And I was like, no. And the When We're in Love album, stunning. And I did not know this was not...
Right. To you, it was, hey, listen, I'm getting this all from one source, and this is what that source is into.
I assume if you like Fast and More, you like the smooth jazz of Harry.
Have you ever asked Thurston Moore how he feels about Harry Connick Jr.? Because I would like to know the answer to that.
I will. No, I know him a little bit. I can totally ask him that.
You should get to, because I think that story is really funny. So when I was growing up, my dad had my dad is a big, both my parents, but really my dad in particular is a kind of music head and of a certain type. And when he would play, he had a folk music show on the local, like, I guess it's public radio, but it's also like university affiliated, KUNM in Albuquerque. He would do this folk music radio show. And that's kind of that at least at that time was sort of the center of his taste. And that's not really my thing, but he did play, like, you know, in our household, you heard a lot of Bob Dylan, you heard a lot of some Rolling Stones, you heard a lot of Beatles, you heard a lot of like, I mean, Cream. We heard my dad had been in England in the mid to late 60s for school. And so there was like an interesting, I really remember hearing Fresh Cream as a kid. And I'm trying to remember, like Richard and Linda Thompson, like some cool stuff. But then hilariously, this is what this reminds me of. He also played the Talking Heads. So when I was growing up, like I thought that basically early Alison Krauss, 90s Dylan, Cream and the Talking Heads were all, like you're saying, like of the same ilk. Like this is all some similar type of music. So I mean, none of the other stuff no CBGB's bands, nothing else from the sort of like New York era that the Talking Heads are associated with ever filtered into our family. So I've asked him later, I'm like, how did that happen? And it really is, somehow it started with Stop Making Sense. And then he worked his way back from that and got into the Talking. It's like this, it's just when you're exposed to somebody else's taste like that, like you're saying, you get some mixed messages about like the order of operations here.
I went to a Harry Connick Jr. show at the Royal Albert Hall wearing a Depeche Mode Songs of Faith and Devotion shirt.
Oh, no. Probably everyone else was just like, is that a movie? Like, I mean, there would sort of be no context. It's not like you would get beaten up, I would imagine. Maybe you would, but mostly I would think it would just, there's so little crossover that no one else would even know what that shirt meant.
And there was a weird thing we didn't know because I was like 13, 14. Could I be let in? And they like snuck me in. And then I had a beer in the bar.
So my friend Jillian, who I was just mentioning in passing, Jillian was cool and it still is very cool. And I don't know, did interesting, wild things that she wasn't allowed to be doing and didn't care if anyone caught her. Whereas I did all those things, but I didn't want to get caught. She had a cool older brother and Jeremy. And Jeremy, I remember vividly, Jillian, I didn't really get the full effect of the cool older brother, but I remember Jeremy was really into all the music that would end up kind of shaping my life. Although I didn't really discover these bands until college, but he was into The Cure and Depeche Mode and probably Jesus and Mary Chain and all those. And he had a copy of Disintegration. Jillian had a tape. I can see the cassette, and she handed it to me one day and she was like, Jeremy and I are not sure if you're ready for this, but here you go, try it out. And I was like, very reverential. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'll do my best, to show up for this. And I put it in my 1983 Volvo DL station wagon cassette player and drove around playing it in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mean, so there was stuff that snuck in. I had another friend in high school who was just, I don't know where, he was just ready for stuff. He was into Bjork and like some of the big bands like PJ Harvey, artists who were certainly not obscure in any way and of the era, not of like a slightly previous era. But I remember listening to Bjork when I was like 14 or 15 and just being like, I don't know, like it just didn't happen. This is what I was listening to in high school. I was listening to Pearl Jam. I was listening to Nirvana. I was listening to Tori Amos. I was listening to No Doubt. And I was listening to a lot of old music, like 60s old music. Joni Mitchell, Dylan, Neil Young, kind of paragons of what I guess at that point was already classic rock and this parent music. But it just was easier somehow to get it. I didn't put the two and two together that somehow there would be contemporary versions of music that was that meaningful. Just again, it all just felt like part of this other world that you got to kind of like look up and study. But I remember going to the library in high school and printing out all the backlog of articles that I could find on things Eddie Vedder had said over time, and then putting them in a folder like for school and, reading them and highlighting them. It was just like the ultimate nerdy.
Yeah, I did that with Smashing Pumpkins. That was one of my...
Smashing Pumpkins were huge for me. Loved Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Just felt you could find out something about some information about how to be alive from these people. Like that was going to be in there somewhere. Billy Corgan would know and tell you. Yeah,
it's weird. All he'd reference was Thin Lizzy. And then I bought like the Thin Lizzy best of and was like, I can't put the dots together. What the fuck is this?
Dude, what are you talking about?
Am I getting the wrong album? And then I tried up, I'm like, no, this still is not my vibe. And then later on, you can kind of like, all right, no, there's loads of shoegaze in here.
These are the connections, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, just so strange.
Probably my favorite band ever is the Pixies. And I think I got to the Pixies from reading about Nirvana. And I think, this sort of idea, you don't know, Thin Lizzy, you don't always get where you're supposed to get next, but there is this way in which, like, I definitely felt like I was a big Garbage fan. I really worshiped Shirley Manson. I thought she was amazing, and she is. It was sort of like, I felt like those people were sort of like Greek myth characters, like these individuals who live in some sort of literally fantastical alternate reality. And I keep thinking of like the notion of Mount Olympus in the Greek myths, like they're all there together and they're hanging out and they're here to kind of, again, in a sort of almost religious way. They're like, I remember reading this I can picture it, like reading this Q&A with Shirley Manson and Rolling Stone and just feeling sort of I'm going to follow all of her instructions. She's saying, do this, do that as a woman, do that. It's like, great. Okay. Here's my messaging. This is it. But the idea that person was real seemed insane. And later, I mean, it was really a beautiful way to exist with music. I think you're describing a similar feeling. It's like you get to have the freedom and the purity of a kind of lack of reality relationship with all of this sound and the people who make it. And it's very cool. And then, but what I was going to say is that later when I was in New York and all these bands that became part of the Meet Me in the Bathroom world, or the Meet Me in the Bathroom world was happening. What was wild was just the moment. I mean, really the moment that I had the idea to even write the book was when I was at Madison Square Garden seeing the then final LCD Sound System show, which of course did not turn out to be final, but was at the time. And the Strokes, who had played MSG in that same couple, like that same week, in April of 2011. And it was only then in that moment where I was sort of like, oh, even though of course, you know, that those bands are successful, it was like, for whatever reason, there was something about that venue and how good those shows were, just how grown up everybody seemed, or it was like, oh shit, I think it's possible that these bands are like Nirvana. I mean, not like that they, of course, whatever, record sales, but sort of in terms of generational significance or having whatever role they were playing for the culture in that particular moment and have gone on to play. It's like, it occurred to me that gap just narrowed. Like these people that used to feel really far away for you, me as a kid, that's who these people are for this era. And that was kind of sobering in a weird way. Sort of just not sad, but like, yeah, humbling, a bit humbling. And then I thought, I got to figure out I need to understand this better, which is usually how some project that takes 7 years takes over your life. You're like, let me understand this better. I'll do some writing around it. Famous last words.
I remember when you were saying about being obsessed with Shirley Manson, I had to confess, and when we were introducing Me in the Bathroom on Friday, that on the way there, I was listening to loads of Strokes and Interpol, and I was going through my Facebook photos, and I was so fucking obsessed with Paul Banks. It was another level of stan. And I think this was when you're going through your 20s and trying on different personalities and looks. This was my final time in the dressing room where I had the ill-fitting, painful American Apparel brogues.
Oh,
sure. I had the suit. I splashed out stupid money on a vintage Armani tie, and I was at this, and I'd even have a badge that says Interpol, like a name tag, just in case you don't know what I'm trying to be.
So I am referencing, like, let's not let this be subtle.
Yeah, like, hello, my name is like Interpol wannabe in London, and I was in Camden, and Paul Banks left, and my friend's like, "There's fucking Paul Banks," and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna do it." And I went up and I was like, "Paul, on the last track on Turn on the Bright Lights, do you sing pony or phony?" And he was like, "Pony." And I was like, "Oh, cool." I was like, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "I'm going to be at the show and I'll see you." Well, not in the sense that we'll meet, that I'll be in the crowd at watching. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, I sound like Mark fucking David Chapman right here. Like, mental note, extra security for the ICA show tomorrow. and then I was like, all right, cool. See ya. And he was very sweet. And I think he could totally understand this is an awkward as fuck overexcited fan who's just ruining this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like walking away and I'm limping away because I'm wearing the American Apparel brogues, which I had to I had to stop wearing because I remember I had these yellow socks because I'd have to pop with a weird sock. And my friend was like, "Cool socks. Why are they got a little bit red and orange in them?" And I was like, "Oh no, my shoes are just filling up with blood because the ankle bit had this the big metal rod."
No, Lucinda's upset by this story.
Understandably, I'm sorry, it's over soon.
Hold on, let me let her out. Sorry. Go on. I'm a very professional podcast guest.
No, that's totally fine. But yeah, my shoes were literally filling up with blood from the ankle was just hacking, the ankle bar was just hacking away at me.
Let's just give you some points though for your commitment to your look. I
Thank
mean,
you.
you know, it's usually women who are suffering for style, but I think it's you in a weird way. What you're doing is a kind of egalitarian effort on your part to even the playing field. And listen, looking like it's just so funny. What I was going to say is attempting to look like Interpol is a worthy pursuit. You know, these are good looking men who
I know, but they're skinny and they pop.
Stage.
Yeah. I think it was definitely at that point where you kind of had to take the harsh lesson and bitter pill that you can get clothes similar to them, but it's not gonna like. I was always dad bod, and I was like fucking sweating, wearing these goddamn 3 fucking layers of an outfit and
right, the sweater, the V-neck sweater with the blazer and
the blazer, the tie,
like so much
commitment to the bit. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I was like, it's the same when I have the same energy when I see I've met Warren Ellis a few times, and he's always so impeccably dressed. He is
so well turned out, totally.
Such a zaddy. And I'm like, I say to him, like, dude, do you ever just wear a fucking tracksuit? And he was like, no, just maybe like a little Lacoste polo, but no, it's the pointy fucking shoes, the Gucci flares, and the bespoke shirt and stuff. And
there's a thing about a uniform that's real. I've never, you know what, honestly, this is a very triggering conversation for me because I just feel this. Like I've always wanted, I'm at my best. And where I'm going with this is that I think we all are attracted to this idea, whether we can achieve it or not. But at various points in my life, I have had moments where it's like a look emerges that just feels right. Like a thing. And it's not, whatever. Great. Warren Ellis, Paul, like there's a million examples of this from music generally and just artists in general you're identifying people with great looks. Fine. But like you can do that for yourself. It might not be their look. It's like it's this sort of this sense of individual style, but also just like the right look, the right representation, like physical object, that the piece of clothing that represents that look at the right time. Sometimes when you get it right, all this stuff that seems ridiculous when we talk about it, like in your story, it's like, wouldn't it be awesome if I could just dress like Paul Banks all the time, or somebody from Interpol or whatever? It's like, the answer is yes, it would, because something you're being drawn to there is not just like, hey, this guy looks great. It's about the sense of inhabiting your body and your look in the world in a way that's like quite satisfying when it actually happens. Like it is as good to be Warren as you think it is. I feel like I can't always get there. I can't always get there. Sometimes it's just off.
You need to know when to stop.
Yeah.
It's funny. My girlfriend has, I call it the face, where if we're like in a shop and I'm like, I'm going to try this, and like, what do you think? And she's like, I'm like, that's, you're not playing off. Like, I love you, and she's giving me the best tough love, but that's just not popping. But you need that.
This is what we need from, among other things, this is what we need from our significant others, is frank honesty about these things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's turn off the lights, not turn on the bright lights for this look. Just put it by. But what was so great from reading your book and the documentary is these people who I honestly thought were the coolest fucking people on earth.
Yeah.
We're just anxious, depressed, introverted, dorky, awkward, #relatable content. It was so great to
yeah.
And obviously as I get to know, as I've got to know like musicians and filmmakers and amazing people, that you just realize that they're just like odd folks, just like all of us.
Stars, they're just like us, right?
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I think that is the through line. And if you interview people a lot as you do, there's like, that's the coolest people, the people who you worship, they all have they are like you. I mean, I think my exception to this is always Beyonce. I'm like, I don't think Beyonce is like the rest of us. I think she's probably the one exception. But like, I mean, I've never met Beyonce, so I can't say for sure. Maybe, and of course that's a joke. Like, she has, part of her power is her vulnerability and stuff. But I think, I mean, the big lesson in talking to musicians and artists and actors and whatever over all these years that I've been doing it, Meet Me in the Bathroom is included in that, but just in my journalism career, is that it's just like it's very, what makes the people who make the stuff you love special is talent for sure, and whatever their unique approach to the world is, approach to their art is, but it's also like the resilience and the kind of doggedness in the face of the same insecurities that we all deal with. Like, one of the things that I really wanted to capture in Meet Me in the Bathroom was just this common theme for, if you think of the four main bands as LCD, Yeah, Yeah, Strokes, and Interpol, like that's the sort of center, first graduating class of the Meet Me in the Bathroom world. It's, even though timeline wise, it's not quite right because LCD's later, but those are kind of the big centers of orbit for the story. The thing they all had in common is this sense of, in totally different ways, honestly, in each case, this sense of feeling like there's something they're supposed to be saying and doing and making, however you want to articulate that, something that belongs to them, each as individuals in those bands, and then collectively. And that the pain of not figuring out how to get it said overrides everything else. And that there's that hunger and that sort of, I mean, and for James, it meant one thing. It mean, in ways that are very obvious if you know this story, like how that looked for James Murphy, who's older and had already spent quite a few years like failing, as he would sort of put it, is one look. And then how it would look for the Strokes is one look, and how it would look for Karen is one look. And Nick, who'd been in bands before too, and then finds a singer that he has this like great musical chemistry with and all that. And then Interpol is the example I always go to, because I actually think Daniel Kessler says this best, articulates something that's true for all these people and true for so many of us. Like, this is what's inspiring about it. When he talks about like the period of time in Interpol's formation, before Interpol really formed, where Daniel is like recruiting all these, he's like in class with Carlos D, and he sees what Carlos is wearing, and he's like, I gotta track that guy down and get him in my band. And Carlos is basically like, no, like, I'm not doing music anymore. I'm doing whatever, film or philosophy or whatever he says he's doing at the time, all things that he was doing and was very interested in. And then he goes to Paul, and Paul's like, no, I'm in a solo thing. Like, I don't need to be in a band. I want to write and perform my own songs. And he's at Sidewalk Cafe most nights, like doing his stuff, which you see in the film. And Daniel, who describes himself as like, I'm paraphrasing, but like a shy person. Daniel's not some like hustling go-getter guy who's like, whatever, fuck you guys, I know it. He's not Madonna. He's not like, he's not a sort of operator in that way. He's not going to go track these people down. But what he says is, but he does do that. And what he says is a version of, again, paraphrasing, like, I just had this awareness that if I didn't do this, I was going to be unhappy for the rest of my life. Like, if I didn't figure, there's just this thing and it's in there, and I can't quite see how it's supposed to manifest or how the pieces are going to come together. I don't see it yet, but I know that if I do not figure out how to, in his case, form this band and get these songs played the way that I just know they're in there and they're supposed to be played, and I have to find the right players. Like, I've got to find the right collaborators. Like, the will to do that pushed him into a place where he did a bunch of things that are totally uncharacteristic for him. Mm-hmm. And I think that articulation of it is something that, like, a version of that happened with all of those other artists. And I think, to your point, you don't think of, whatever, in this case, we were talking about Paul, like somebody who has this kind of Arctic, imperious coolness by nature, as sitting there in some world being like nervous about whether other people will like their songs, or worried that they're going to have, I'm now speaking more generally here, but like, yeah, that some guy, I'm thinking about other band stories and but that some competing band who's playing ahead of them on the Mercury Lounge bill that night is gonna like steal their thunder. Like, it's just not, it seems so far-fetched once we know about these artists and hear this music that would ever be possible. But that's how it was. I mean, it's how it was for each of these people. And I think in music journalism generally, there's a disservice done sometimes in how we tell these stories. It's all about these sort of moments of ascension and like, when did you find the sound that would change? And all that is important. But most of these stories are about suffering in obscurity and confusion and states of self-doubt for fucking years, if you're Interpol,
yeah,
before anyone cares, and I think that's the most inspiring for me part of this story, is that this is all people who came to a city that everyone was told was over creatively at a time when everyone was told guitar music and music, like this music that had like sexuality and sort of primal energy to it, was just like not what we were doing anymore. And all these people were just like, okay, but I have to. Like, I have to. And it's a lesson in, I don't know what, it's a lesson in ignoring your own, it's a lesson in accepting, but also doing it anyway, in terms of accepting your own sense of doubt, but operating to spite it.
This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a great streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. With Mubi, every film is handpicked. And with that said, I want to give you 3 of my favorites from the Mubi UK catalogue. Oh, I love this movie. Mustang from Turkey, 2015, about a group of sisters living together, and when one of them has an arranged marriage set up, they begin to rebel. Stunning movie, and an incredible score by the great Warren Ellis, who you may know from The Dirty Three or his work with Nick Cave. That's number 1. Oh, they've got the Peter Strickland movies. Okay, confession. I interviewed Peter Strickland for the podcast, and it's the only podcast, touch wood, where my podcast equipment failed. It was my first time using portable pod equipment. And let's just say I may have pressed the wrong button. That wasn't the record button. So I'm paying it back. I'm going to give shout outs to Peter Strickland on all his movies for the next episodes. Number 1, The Duke of Burgundy. What a beautiful movie. What a beautiful, weird movie. It's so hard to pitch. It's kind of just beautiful and nightmarish, a sadomasochistic fantasy. If that doesn't sell it, nothing will. There we go. And number 3, my pick is Holy Spider by Ali Abbasi. I saw this at the film festival last year, London Film Festival that is, and it was fantastic. And it's the true story of a serial killer in Iran who was killing prostitutes, and a journalist who helped bring him to justice. But it's not that simple. I urge you to check that out. And you can watch all of these for free if you go to mubi.com/deeper into movies for 30 days free of awesome movies. Mubi.com/deeper into movies. before I started deeper into movies, when I was freelance writing, I did 2 oral histories, one for the show Top Boy and then a more ambitious one for the show Black Mirror. And they were so stressful. Why? I need to win. And anytime I read an oral history or something, I dig in and say it's the oral history of Seinfeld. And then I'm like, you didn't get Larry David. This isn't an oral history. I see you trying to pad it out with Norman or whatever, but I'm very judgy as to who is. It speaks more as to who isn't included sometimes.
Yeah, you see the gaps.
Yeah. So I was going psycho and just on IMDb Pro, and it turned out really well. And I'm sure you found the same, that once I said Charlie Brooker's included, John Hamm's included, Rashida Jones. Totally. They're like, oh, wait. How long do you need again? And I'm like, now we're talking publicist. But right, exactly. I was wondering, how did you start reaching out to people who wasn't interested, and how did you begin to persuade people that this is worth their time and things like that?
Totally. Well, almost exactly as you just said. I think I had the advantage of just a lot of time. Like the book took 2 to 3 times as long as I had told my publisher it would take to write. So it's like, in a way, I didn't have a lot of time because I was stressed the entire time. It's not like I said, oh, this will take 6 years to report and come out. Like, that is not the plan. And I don't recommend that. It took too long. But as a factor, like by virtue of the fact that it just was taking that long, like the reality was that I ended up having a lot of time. So I was able to kind of, people who said no initially in exactly the way you just described came back around when other friends or whatever were, or colleagues or enemies or whatever, they got motivated to speak once that you sort of get this critical mass of voices that matter to the story, and the participants in it recognize that critical mass, or they recognize enough names in it that's sort of like, well, wait, it goes from a fear of being included in something to a fear of not being included in something. So that's like one answer. But I think really what happened at the beginning, and this is the part I like to celebrate, because it's like, these are the people who helped me before there was any fear, not out of under duress, but because they believed in the project and were willing to give me a shot, which is like, Ryan Gentles, the Strokes manager, and my dear old friend, Imran Ahmed from NME, from a bunch of different places, from XL at various points. He now runs his own label and is based in LA and is doing super well. But Imran was like so super crucial for helping me connect. All these people are in the book, but for just being supportive behind the scenes and helping me make connections when I needed connections and vouching for me and so on. And Paul is a big part of this too. Like Paul and Albert Hammond Jr. are the 2 people that I probably, and maybe Karen, those are people that I interviewed a lot. Like every time, I tried not to be annoying, but like Paul and Albert let me come back, a second time, a third time. And really showed up for those interviews, like in a way that's not, a lot of these people, depends on who we're talking about, but a lot of these people are not giant fans of talking to journalists. It's not like number one on your list of things you want to do, and they can be kind of wary. And I really appreciated the sort of earnestness of just like trusting me and trusting the project and respecting how much work I was putting into it. Like, when it's been a year and then another year and you're asking for more, and hey, can you hook me up with this person because I really just want to track down this one detail, in exactly the obsessive way you're describing. Like oral histories can be like spackling. You have this sort of basic outline and even all this great stuff maybe, and you've gathered all that, but then it's like, this person should really be checked in with, and I have no idea how to contact them because they're slipped through the cracks, and are they even in this world anymore? I mean, that's how New York is, right? All these stories are like that. So those are all the people that come to mind. Like, yes, on the one hand, it was like there was a natural order of people are saying no, or nah. And then, it's kind of a soft no. If you come back to them with 3 people they lived with in 2000, like they're going to talk to you. The other thing I also did, which I have talked about to other oral history writers who are journalists, because I think this goes against our instincts as reporters. I mean, I'm not really a traditional reporter, but the rules that I would use for writing a feature or for reporting out a story for New York Magazine or the Times or whatever is different from this. Like, I told sources, I just need your voice. Like, if you would hear, I don't want to talk about 2001 anymore. Like, I'm over that. Okay. Can you tell me what your first relationship with New York City was? Like, what was the myth of New York to you? Why did New York matter to you? Your question about what kind of a teenager you are is a great one. I think the journalistic integrity behind this is strong. The oral history point for me for this book was like, I just want everyone to be represented who belongs to this story if they want to be. Like, there's, of course, for me, there's like people I really need. And I did go after those people. And I would say, you can tell me about your childhood and nothing about your role in this band, but I am also going to tell you 3 different things your bandmate said, just so that like, what's coming out here and you have a chance to comment on those things. But unlike in a piece of real magazine journalism, where I would say you kind of do need to, like, I would feel more of an obligation to make that person, if they're going to participate, show up for the full extent of their involvement in the story. I didn't feel that way about this. It's just sort of like, this really is a communal thing. And if you don't want to talk about whatever, so-and-so's drug addiction, or even, honestly, most of the things people didn't want to talk about weren't even like ostensibly sexy, salacious subjects like that. It was just like, I can't talk about making that EP again. Like, I just can't. It's like, okay, no problem. So I sort of left an open door in that way that I would not have done in a piece in magazine journalism. And of course, what ended up happening is then you get a lot more interesting stuff, because then people are telling you what I hope comes across in the book, and certainly is there in the movie, I think, is like a kind of delicate emotional underbelly of how it actually felt to live through this period of time, rather than like how we got this guitar sound,
So how long did the book take? 6 or 7 years?
I wrote the proposal for a year, basically, and tried to get it sold. So it was 7 years in total from the sort of conception of the idea to publication, but it was 6 years of writing.
So, one, what were you doing otherwise to support yourself? And 2, did you ever get the fear someone's going to come out with a quicker, shittier book and beat me to it? Or is the moment going to pass and I don't know, is this going to be looked on in a different light? Did you ever feel it was going to get away from you? And
I mean, so what's so funny is that, well, I'll answer the first question first. I mean, it ruined my life, and financially it was really hard. And I was writing, I wrote a lot of journalism. My whole journalism career, I sold the book when I was like 31 years old and I finished it when I was 37. I mean, the sort of extent of my career as a print journalist, which sounds like a very antiquated term, but it coincided with the period of time that I was writing this book. So like, I got my contract at Elle during the time I was writing this book, wrote a bunch of stuff for Elle. I started at New York Magazine like around the same time, a little before, but around, like, all the stuff I ever wrote for New York happened at the same time that I was writing this book. So that's part of why it took so long. Like, I could not just do this. It was not feasible. And so I had to kind of like fit it in to my broader creative endeavors and my, like, the other writing that I was doing for money and for creative satisfaction. But it was really hard. And I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm trying not to ever do that again. Although it's hard, like book writing is like a real mental war. So that's the answer to that. In terms of like figuring out how to, I mean, I guess, well, okay, ask the question again. So first it's like, how did I ask me again so that I can.
So yeah, I was just thinking when you're working on,
I'll go on a tangent otherwise.
Okay, and I was thinking when you're working on a super long project like this on a piece, even in movies, I've done when people have made a. There was the Joy Division Control movie, and then there was, in my opinion, the even better Joy Division documentary that the guy who made Meeting People is Easy made, which came out and got completely ignored.
Getting scooped, essentially.
Yeah. So I was wondering, is maybe word gets out that there's a reinterest in the scene, or
Right. This is a better way to answer that. I'm glad I asked you to repeat it, because otherwise I get like too in my own weeds about it. Here's what's true. Nobody cared about this. So I was not worried. When I first sold the book, I vividly remember going to Ryan's house, Ryan Gentles, who's the best and a really old friend of mine, and somebody I needed on my side immediately, obviously, to get this done right. But so I went to his house and I was like, Ryan, I want to, we had drinks on his roof. And I was like, hey, so I sold this book and I'm going to write this book. And he was like, really? And I was, of course, concerned that it's going to be like, everyone's going to be against it and they're not going to want, I said, it's Please Kill Me for our era, which is what it is. And everybody in this world worships Please Kill Me, as they should. But his attitude wasn't like, oh my God, like spilling secrets. No. His attitude was like, is anyone going to fucking care? Like, what? We're not Please Kill Me. Like, Please Kill Me is Please. Are you kidding? Like, the attitude was very, and this is the opposite of a diss to Ryan. This is like, I encountered that a lot. Like most of the people who I first contacted, like very first interviews, was like, sure. Like they were humoring me. It felt like that. It was sort of like, Lizzy, I knew a lot of these people. It's like, okay, yeah. Well, your sort of pet project about this book you're going to write about our time in New York. Like, of course, I'll like, let you meet me at the bar on Sunday afternoon and talk for an hour about whatever. But like, okay, just the idea that somebody would scoop me for years was the opposite of how this felt, because nobody seemed to understand, including and especially the people who were key participants in this scene, that there was anything to scoop. And I think part of the virtue of that is something you got at in your question, which is really about timing. Like, I did not worry that it was going to be too late, because I actually think I was a bit early. So I sold the book in 2012, had the idea in 2011. And that's really right on the end of the period of time that it covers. Like this whole, I in a way, I think, and this is something Will and Dylan and I talked about a lot in the course of them proposing to me this documentary, and then in the course of them making it, which is that we all really, one of the things the film and the book has in common, I think, is a goal to sort of help us understand, is the way in which we both, Will and Dylan as one sort of creative arm, and me as the writer of this book, see this period of time as an almost like living history of where we are now. Like, it's like, this is how we got here. This period of time is when all the stuff changed that made the reality we're now living in, that we're still just beginning to understand. Technological revolution, generational identity, all these sort of like high concept frames that get thrown around, like all that stuff is really important to the Meet Me in the Bathroom story. And this is the like origin point for it, like the stem cell time for everything we're living through now. So when the book came out in 2017, it was like basically, oh, this is right when people are starting to just recognize that this might have been an interesting period of time that we document in this way. So I got lucky accidentally in that way. But now, now that I think about it, I should have been more concerned, but I just was too busy being stressed about the writing of the book to worry that, well, although final thing I'll say about that, my friend and ex-boyfriend, Mark Spitz, to whom the book is dedicated, used to say to me when I was super stressed out about it, I would be like whining about blah, 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 how broke I was and how nobody, so-and-so wouldn't talk to me or whatever. And he would just look at me and he would occasionally go, I want you to pretend that one of the guys that you worked with at Rolling Stone who were mean to you has now decided he's writing this book. And now I want you to go figure out how you would feel about that and operate from that place for the next day's work. And of course, whenever he sort of framed it that way, I would be like, I'd just be like, I'll fucking kill him, just like this total sense of possession and self-possession and, from who knows where it comes, like power and motivation, like the fear of being done in by one of your nemesis is like pretty powerful. So he would sort of use that against me occasionally to help motivate me, but I never really had that feeling.
I knew Mark a little bit. We used to email.
Really? No way.
The last time I spoke to him was to tell him to watch the Nick Cave documentary.
Really?
And he said,
how did you guys get in touch initially?
Instagram. I think he was working. I think from what I gleaned, he was always really vague about. He was
writing a book about film,
about musicals or music in movies.
He called it, it's actually funny, I've never told anyone this. This is like, so it's called Rock Pictures. He wrote a book that is as of yet unpublished, about movies that he considered rock and roll, which is, of course, in this case, a descriptor rather than like movies about rock and roll. Yeah. And that makes sense, actually, that you guys would have found your way to each other in that context.
Yeah. I was like his dog photos and all his videos all his photos of his VHS collection and movie books and stuff. And I'd be like,
ultimate nerd.
Like, hey, I can't, what's the one on the fourth shelf to the right in the green font? And he'd be like, oh, you got to check this out. And
that's awesome. That makes me really happy to hear.
Funny you touched on the revenge theory.
Yeah.
Ridiculously, I've got to do a mentorship class at the V&A Museum on Saturday talking about how I started showing movies.
Cool.
And one of the things I was unsure of putting in is that my friend used to run a night showing movies on VHS in East London. And I was like, that's the coolest fucking job in the world.
Seriously.
Then I took over and they fucking hated me in the bar. They were really, it was the end of the kind of indie rave scene, and they were the old guys on the block who still thought they were really cool. And we just didn't get along. And they were all like, the guys behind the bar had like Brazzers t-shirts and stuff and like Pornhub and stuff. And I was like, oh God. Yeah. All painfully single and just moody and doing bad coke and stuff. And I'd come in there showing movies.
We all know these guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came in and said one week, and I said, how about the best movies you've not seen? And we'll show Michael Galinsky's Half Cocked, Scorsese's After Hours. They all laughed, and one more. And they were like, you're fired.
What?
I was like, this is sick. And then I was like, okay. So I left. And honestly, I was being paid.
Why did they fire you?
I took it too seriously. I was on some MoMA level Criterion curation. And then when I left, the first movie they showed was Predator 2. So it just says it all.
Weren't with your people, and they weren't. Yeah.
And then I went to Moth Club down the road, which is like the coolest. I picture it as if Twin Peaks was a workingmen's club in London.
Oh my God.
This is what this venue looks like. And I went there and I showed Half Cocked, and Ian Sylvanus did an intro for me and had this whole crazy video saying the film is black and white because the film got old and the color fell off. And peak Ian intro. And then the next week I showed Fugazi Instrument, and Jem Cohen was in town, and we recorded an intro, and he just said, please support your independent cinemas and art spaces. If you don't, they will go away. And I was like, mission statement right here. But it was all just on revenge. And I got an email from the boss like, what the fuck is this Monday movie nights? And I was like,
you're like, dude.
Oh, is that the same night as yours? Oh, didn't know. Sorry. It's
very motivating to be told no. I mean, there's a way to go with this too that has to, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that kind of derision for everybody who's moving through these sort of like very gatekeepery cultural spaces. But also it's worth pointing out, especially for women, and anybody who doesn't look like in whatever way you're supposed to look like the sort of subculture you're entering. And when I started in the music business, there was just a lot. I mean, it's just like the number of times you're just the only female person there. And especially at that time, there's nobody who's not white. And it's just very white, very male, very, here are the bands that you're supposed to like. And that was tough. And I think one of the things that's motivating about it, exactly as you're saying, is like, in this case, or in this area, I'm not applying this specifically to one gender or another, because it happens to everyone. I mean, being told no is the great motivator for the I mean, revenge is the motivation of LCD Sound System. James says this in the book. He's like, hey, I wanted the Rapture to be my rock stars. I wanted Luke to be my proxy rock star, and that's what we were going to do. And I had Tim on my side, and we had formed DFA, and like the Rapture were going to be my rock stars. And then, you know, this is all reported out, but like, then they bailed on me and sort of screwed me over. And so I was like, fuck you. Now I'm going to start my own band. And like, that's how LCD Sound System starts. So revenge is a universal motivator for everyone. But I think that feeling of being, to use the sort of like hyper therapized language of our time, like unseen, being told that you're like, the rejection, just various shades of rejection, even if it's by a dude in a Pornhub t-shirt, like you're still sort of like, there's something profound that happens when you care about something and people tell you you're stupid in the face of that. Absolutely. It's very animating. And I don't turn into Darth Vader. I like that. Just a quick side note, don't turn into Darth Vader. But a certain amount of Darth Vader is okay.
Yeah, no, just, I was kind of thinking of like putting gas in the tank.
Darth, you know,
a little bit of diesel, and then the rest unleaded for, you know, not for the toxic layers. Wasn't there I'm maybe fucking the story up, but wasn't the story that Walt Disney did a film or something fell apart and he was really depressed and started building a little train ride in his garden?
I don't know this one. That's so great.
He built a little ride in his garden because he was so fucking depressed from his previous failure, and that's what sparked Disneyland.
Next thing you know, yeah, that's awesome. I love these stories. I was making a podcast for a while called Difficult Artist, where I just talked to people about this type of thing, about like, there were two stories that I had been told throughout the course of my like journalism life that stuck with me, that fit this, that are about creative process in exactly this way, like the value of failure. And I'll tell them both. They're short. The first is Jennifer Egan, the novelist Jennifer Egan, who actually there's an amazing profile of her that just came out in the New Yorker in which she talks about some of this. Jennifer Egan, who's written so many different I don't know how many novels she's written, but a handful of novels, each of which is like really different, like genre wise, just utterly, they have almost nothing in common in terms of
she's
style.
Goon Squad, right?
Goon Squad. Yeah. Welcome to the Goon Squad. And the one that she put out this last year was The Candy House. But she had also written, I interviewed her when she'd just written Manhattan Beach, which is a like relatively straightforward historical romance novel. And so that's like what she did after Goon Squad. It's just like, and she's written like some gothic, like almost Daphne du Maurier-ish, like sort of pulp gothic stuff. She's amazing. And I'd interviewed her, and she basically said, among other things, I was asking her about, I don't remember how we even got into this. I don't know if I even asked her directly about sort of different genres, but here are some of the things she told me. She told me that she writes by hand in like a porch near her house, like off her house. And she sometimes researches for years, talk about faith, without really knowing why she's researching a particular subject. Like we were talking about Manhattan Beach, that has this sort of underwater diving in the era of World War II in it. She's like got interested in that and just followed that, researched it for years, didn't do anything with it, and then just starts writing the story. She handwrites, no outline, doesn't read it back, does that for months. And I was freaking out as a writer, just going, wait, what? Like, this is making me so nervous. Just hearing this is making me feel sick, like on your behalf. And she was laughing and whatever. We were talking about this. And the pull quote, to use I just almost said that, it shows you how deep it is. But is she said her central gift is her doggedness. It's this sense of, because, this is an incredibly talented writer. She's got, you're sort of like, no, your central gift is you're a genius. But she's like, no, I mean, that's not how she experiences it. What she experiences is a sense of unrelenting determination to get to whatever she can't see yet, but that is somehow in there. And then the other story, briefly, is a Trent Reznor story. So Trent, I'd interviewed him for something, and he told me that when he's always been interested in film. This is like, he was talking about the past. And when David Fincher first contacted him about doing the soundtrack for Social Network, he had not, or doing, like working on Social Network with him. He was like, he turned him down. He had just gotten off the road. He was exhausted, and he didn't know how to do scores. Like, really, he'd worked some on, like, but basically this was going to be the first big one. And he loves Fincher, and he was, as an artist, like, really respected him. And he told me this story about like telling Fincher no, being like, I can't, I'm too exhausted and I don't know how to do it. Basically, I don't know if he phrased it that way. I mean, he didn't phrase it that way, but he was basically like, I can't. But he couldn't, it ate at him that he had said no to this thing that like seemed like kind of an exciting challenge, that he just, like, he sort of hated himself for not being able to show up for this project of trying to figure out how to do this. And I so relate to that. Like, in the version of this, you want to say that you imagine Trent Reznor, genius, wins a million Oscars for all of his different scoring roles now, right? You imagine that he, like, it's birds are singing and he feels, he's like, oh, I'm so inspired by this film about Facebook that you've brought to me. And yes, I suddenly have these ideas and let's get to work. And that's how you think somehow, that somehow we tell ourselves that's how it's supposed to look. No, it's from self-loathing. He was like, I can't stand that I turn this down, but I also don't know how to do it. So like a month later, he calls Fincher back and he's like, I just want you to know that I still can't do this, but I hate myself for it. And Fincher's like, well, that's good to hear, because we actually haven't hired anyone, because basically I've been waiting for you, and like, you start tomorrow. And he rolls up in the end of the story is like, he and Atticus roll up into the studio the next day or whatever, like the first day they're trying to work on this. And he goes, I mean, Trent is very funny and dry. He's just like, I don't know, do we like call Hans Zimmer? I think I have his number. I mean, what do we do? And what they did instead is, and this is the larger theme here, he remembers seeing a piece of film that just has like Jesse Eisenberg's flip-flops going up the stairs at Harvard. And Trent's like, I don't know how to quote unquote score a movie, but I know how this moment should feel. It should feel like this. And he starts to play. And it's like, that's the creative process. That's the thing that actually matters. It's like, I don't know how other people do this. I don't know. There's some external thing that's supposed to be the way this all works, I think. And other people have it and I don't. But the real process of art making is letting all that self-doubt exist, but again, being like, yeah, I hear you, self-doubt. Anyway, how should this moment feel? How does this story unfold if you're Jennifer Egan? And just sort of trusting, that's the art of it in terms of the process, is like the trust in yourself that like that has value. And maybe that value won't present itself. That's why the Jennifer Egan story is so cool for fucking years. But that to just show up for the blank page in that way with what you uniquely bring is the game. And all of these artists, revenge can this is where I got to this, revenge can put you in that place sometimes with a certain clarity that you might not have had without the pressure of being told your shit.
Yeah. Who is it? The guy from the Black Keys on your pod had great advice where he said,
oh, you listened to it. That's cool.
Yeah. That really helped, especially during the pandemic when everyone was feeling so frustrated. Good. And he said he was working on an idea, and I think Danger Mouse was like, let's try this. And he was like, no, fuck that. And then he said, dude, shut the fuck up and just let me try it. And if it's shit, it's shit. But let me know it's shit. But
totally.
Yeah. I do the exact same thing often with my designer where I'm like, put the graphic in pink. And he's like, it's going to look fucking terrible, dude. That goes against all my design, principles. And I'm like, if it's shit, we won't use it, but try it. And I was like, yeah, that's fucking sick. Just like I thought it would.
You can't be afraid, but sometimes when that happens, it is shit, and that's okay too.
That's like, fine too. Yeah. You know, but better to know.
But we get so terrified by the idea. It's the constant recurring theme of the space between how you think things are supposed to be and how things actually are. And the fear of discovering that it's bad. Like when I'm working on a memoir right now, sort of, I'm working on, a version. I have a book in mind that's basically about my side of this era, but it's also about Mark and moving to New York and coming of age and all that good stuff that we're all into. And I'm just confronting again and again the same thing. I haven't tried to write something this meaty since Meet Me in the Bathroom, really. And certainly never anything this personal. And it's so harrowing, that first draft, because you're just like, it's so bad. Like the illusion is that, oh yeah, writing, it's so hard, or art in general is so hard. But and to your example, it's like, just do the graphic this way and then it'll be great. And then sometimes you're the danger mouse in that situation. You're like, just fucking try it. And then it is trash. And then you're like, wait, that's not the cinematic ending I was looking for. But that is part of it too, is just like the art, the practice of it is to just put yourself through that rather than to expect that it'll be good every time. It's the labor of it, At least that's what I keep telling myself.
Boom. That was me and Lizzy Goodman. Damn, she's smart. If you haven't already, read Meet Me in the Bathroom. It's one of the best books on music I've ever read. And go see the movie. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Joshua Eustace, aka Telephone Tel Aviv, for my beautiful music. And you guys for listening. We'll speak soon.